Hello there reason users, PoohBear here and welcome to my channel, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different, something actually probably more for me. A few years ago now I actually put this combinator patch together, and what this combinator patch was doing, if you didn't realise, is I've got a Thor at the top which is actually changing the pattern automatically for, in this particular case, happens to be sequences. It was more designed because someone wanted to have more than 16 steps on the drum machine, which obviously I've got hiding down here. So they wanted more than 16 steps on the drum machine. And that is where this kind of combinator came in, because effectively you could obviously string all 8 patterns together to give you 128 steps. And it's done automatically, so you didn't have to put anything in the sequencer. And that was the purpose behind it. I tend to use it for driving synths and coming up with different patterns on synths. Now, I don't use this that much. As I said, I've done it for someone else. I did a video the other day where I was actually using my MIDI controllers to change patterns, and that's something I do end up doing a lot. And I thought, well, actually, what would be more handy for me if I had a quick graphical way when I was actually working in the rack and I'm composing, that I can actually change the order of how the patterns are going to play. I don't want to drop down into the sequences and play around with stuff. It's stuff I want to do on the fly. And so I've come up with quite a few different solutions, and then I decided, well, let's actually have a look at my top 3 solutions, and that's what I'm going to present to you today. As I said, this whole sort of project has little bits of it. There's even more than this, but I was coming up with all kinds of things of actually getting it to work. We could even use set program to actually go through different programs. I was using voltage modulators to do things. We've got the step note record here. We could even do things with the matrix, but there is issues with the matrix. And even with the drum sequencer itself, we could actually get the drum sequencer to change patterns. But again, there's gotchas there. And both of these are to do with speed issues, which I will talk about. But my final top 3 devices that I decided that I was going to use is going to be Pearl over here. Let's just try and scroll on the screen. Here we go, we've got Pearl, we've got sequences, and we've got compulsions. So it allows us to be able to put, say, like here, this little stagger going up, and it's going from 0, which is no pattern. And obviously you can see it's now on the first step, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth. And that's going to scroll through 8 patterns. But there's nothing stopping me here. Whoops, let's quickly scroll in, he says. Nothing stopping me here, just dragging that note and dragging it down. And now that's going to play pattern number 1 again when it gets to that point. And that's what I wanted. I wanted something nice and quick, which I can actually mix up together. And so, as I say, I've come up with 3 kind of solutions. Now, Pearl for me is probably... was quite funny that when I was messing around to start with, I kind of had Pearl in 3rd place as my final solution, and compulsion was in my 1st place and sequences was in the middle. But the more I've actually used it, Pearl snuck up into kind of 1st place because it's limited. So it's limited that it can only work with 8 pattern devices. And the other rule I wanted was I didn't want to come in here and start paging around or scrolling the screen up and down, or, you know, like this player. So I look at this device and say, well, actually I can only see 36 patterns I could change between. I don't actually have any 36 pattern devices, so that's a bit irrelevant. And in this particular case, it's even more irrelevant because I can say, oh, I've got 36 patterns I can change, but I've only got 32 steps, so that doesn't quite work. And compulsion's quite a good one because obviously it can do 16 patterns, which is quite nice, and it's got 32 steps. And something like propulsion actually does have 16 patterns. But as I say, this is for experimentation. This is for when we're composing. I would not be linking together 16 different patterns. If I'm perfectly honest, I won't be doing it. I'd probably be dealing with like maybe 4 patterns at the maximum. But there is actually some real nice creative stuff we can do with all of these. So it doesn't matter which one we're using. We can do some really nice creative stuff with it. So I've got my zoom program on, so I'm zooming all over the place, aren't I? Let's just leave the mouse alone. As I said, so the key thing here is like this is going to play pattern number 1, it's going to do 2, then it's going to do 3, then it's going to jump down to 1, then it's going to jump up to 5. But I can just come in here and go, actually, that's what I want these 2 patterns. We can also change it in such a way that we can affect the timing that this is actually going super fast. So at the moment, I say this dot here when we're running it's going to play the whole pattern. I can actually speed this up that I'm going to need 2 of these to play the whole pattern, which would mean if I was to change that, it's going to play half a pattern, and then it's going to go on to pattern number 2 and then play that other half. I can obviously speed up even more, that it's going to take the first quarter of pattern number 1, the second quarter of pattern number 2, it's now going to take a quarter of pattern 4, and then obviously here I'm going jumping back down to the 1, so I'm taking 1 again. So from pattern number 1 I'm taking these 2 bits of quarters, and that's coming from 2 and that's coming from 4. So you can really kind of mix it up as well to give you some interesting results very, very quickly to say, oh actually yeah, I do like that. And then I could make up a new pattern with all them components in it to say, well, there's my final thing. As I say, it's more to do with the composing stage. And what I've just done there and talked about there in Pearl, we can also do with sequences, and we can also do with compulsion. As I say, Pearl, first of all, has the most limits in a way, because it's only got the 8 steps. You can't, or you can only change 8 patterns, but it's got many steps. But with Pearl, again, even though you can come here and say, hey, I'm going to start increasing these patterns or these steps, there's a timing thing. So as you increase the number of steps, it kind of affects the speed. So you are semi-limited to what you can do speed-wise with this. Sequences, on the other hand, I'd say it can produce a lot more, change a lot more patterns, but I don't, in this particular screen, you can see 36. Obviously sequences could do 128, but I'm not wanting to scroll. That's a big no-no. I want to be able to very quickly come in and do things. I don't have anything with 36 patterns, and obviously it's 32 steps. So all of a sudden I found when I was actually wanting to try to use these things, well, all this extra functionality is great on paper, i.e. spec, but I'm never going to use it. So it becomes a bit irrelevant. And also with sequences, the special thing about sequences is its speed, its rate here, does not go slow enough. And that's a problem and an issue I had with a lot of Reason devices, not just Reason devices, third-party devices, rack extensions, is we couldn't get the rate slow enough. So as one step would not complete, say, even a complete drum pattern, it'd just do half. But what we can do with sequences, which made it a bit special, is we can put it into step mode, and then I can use something like little LFO using a square to drive it. And little LFO has a humongous range speed-wise, so we can actually really go down. And I mean, we're talking about we could actually make it each step play the pattern, say 8 times or something, and play it that way. But as I say, we've got to then play with a little bit of scaling and all the rest of it. And then finally, we have compulsion. And the thing I like about compulsion is the speed is all internal. We can really slow it down just using this rate. But if we really wanted to go stupid, then also you've got the divisions, and you can actually divide it even more. And I think it's, I can't remember what it was in the end, but again, you're probably going up to something like 16 times it'll play a pattern before it goes on to the next one. Again, for me, that started to become silly because I'm trying to do things quickly while I'm composing, and I'm not going to be playing something for 16 patterns and then it's going to move on. If it is that much, I would just use a button. You know, as I say, I'm at the composing stage, so I wouldn't need it. This is for doing sort of quick things. But it's there, the fact that the functionality is there. So how they all work, or these two work, is we're all talking into the mod panel. The mod panel is actually taking the note data. Now, note data itself is actually a bit of voltage, and we can take this bit of voltage, and as you can see, we're starting at so C -2 happens to be 0 volt, and these are very small voltages. And actually, we take that gate, that note, should I say, putting it into Janitor, and we're actually scaling it up, and I'm using the RVL to do the scaling because this scale knob only scales it by 2, and we're actually scaling it by, in this particular case, 7.5 volts. That's because there's 16 steps. Interestingly, this is set up the same way, obviously the same sort of notes, but you'll notice we're scaling it by 15 because we've only got half the amount of steps. So if I was to say propulsion, I want you now to control something like the drum sequencer rather than propulsion itself, I would have to up that figure there to 15 volts because I'm only going to be using, as I say, well, 8, I could use 9. The reason you'd use 9, there's only 8 patterns, admittedly, on propulsion and not propulsion, on the drum sequencer and a lot of sequences, but 0 volts will actually turn it off. So I think of it as 9 patterns. It just happens to be the 0 is no pattern. So it's a bit like doing a bypass. So I do think of it as 9 steps. So yeah, so we just have to scale that by 15 volts in that particular case. I will make all these combinators fully available, and they're going to be available in combinator version 1, so you can use them in earlier versions of Reason. And it is just a simple case, I say, of scaling it down. We then take that output, and the output's then going obviously into the, let's quickly pop into here, into the combinator, and it is just a simple case like on this propulsion here. We've got a CV1 in. I am zoomed in, aren't I? Hey, there we go. This is my CV1 in, and there's the patterns, so you just choose your patterns. And it's the same with all of them. They'll all be the same sort of thing. As you can see, we've got a lot more going on in here, so this makes it a little bit more confusing. So, drum sequencer. So there we go, there's a drum sequencer. So there's a pattern select. So I go from, happens to be going from, with Pearl, it'd be 1 to 8 because I've only got 8 options. I haven't got 9. That's the advantage of sequences. But again, I was saying to myself, well, how often am I actually going to be actually doing that? And the answer was, well, when I was actually using it, I wasn't. So because I wasn't, I decided, well, there's no point really. Even though I'm saying from 0 to 8, I'm not actually using that last one. So there's a lot more going on in this combinator than it looks, only because I've stacked this combinator up. As I say, I'm only using the first part, and the bottom half I'm not really using. I was playing around. This is configured the same using the 15 volt scaling as sequences. So I was sort of playing around with that and decided, well, actually, we don't have to, because the advantage of Pearl is we can actually come in and make each row very specifically a note value, and that note value happens to tie into exactly the same voltage as this. So C-1 voltage happens to be pattern number 1, F0 there happens to be pattern number 2, 3, 4, boom, 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 boom. And I use things like the dual CV monitor here, so you can put it into a note view, and I can actually scroll up the note, and when I see it change, I can go, hey, there we go, that's the note I need, and I can just put it in. So I sort of using that for doing that kind of thing. So there we go. It's quite simple to, as I say, to use. This is a little bit of a different kind of video. Where, as I say, I'm going to stress again, speed these things up, start nicking bits of pattern from different patterns. So we're going to take a segment from pattern 1, 2, 3 and 4, whatever, and start playing it that way. And you can come up with some interesting stuff, which could be very, very usable. So quickly throwing this together, basically I've got this propulsion here, which is actually going to be controlling the patterns here of this chord sequencer. I've got this sequences here, which is all set up, which is going to be controlling this compulsion down here. I've got this Pearl over here, which is obviously controlling the different patterns which are coming from this drum sequencer. And it's basically the default disco pattern from one of the sound banks. So down this stack here, yes, we're driving the chords, we're going out from the MIDI out, and then that's coming down another stack, going through another compulsion. We've got another compulsion at the top here, and we're going off to a friction there, and then this sequence is just playing a bass really. That's what that's coming down. That's going to actually be doing the bass and changing the bass sound and that. So as I said, I'll quickly throw this together, so let's play out with this, and I'll be changing some of the options as we go along, because that's the whole point of this, is to change things on the fly. Anyway, thanks for watching, and bye for now.